Good evening to everyone, and this subject is kind of interesting, the ultimate victory. So what kind of victory are we talking about? It is said that there is the non-violent war, and so we do need to think about what sort of thing is that, and it's definitely an internal matter. So I hope you can hear me all right. So this internal war is a war within the mind, within the heart, and it is something that you have going on, not all the time, no doubt, but there is different types of internal conflicts which take place. And this is to do with the complications of consciousness. We are actually quite complex beings, and from a psychological point of view, the medical profession will look at you in a certain way, but from a spiritual point of view, we'll see it in a little bit different way. And we talk about the battle of the soul against different types of dark forces, negative energies. Karma is a very important aspect of this. And so let's take a look at the big picture and then narrow it down to the self. So in terms of the big picture, you have got humanity, all of humanity, which is dealing with the idea of negativity, the experience of negativity in daily life, and then also on the larger historical format. Every so often there are wars between nations, between religions, between races, and all these things that take place are called karma. So there is the idea of collective karma. So when you are part of a country which is engaged in war against another country, then you're somehow implicated and it affects you. If it's a war of religions, then if you're part of one religion which is against another religion, you're implicated in that. If it's a race war, then whichever race you are in, you're part of that, you're implicated, and it creates karmic bondages and karmic debts. So any kind of man's inhumanity to man clogs up a debt and creates a shadow of negativity over the face of humanity in general and people in particular. And one of the things that you get in the world of entertainment is this stories about heroes who take up the banner of representing the force of good and taking down the force of evil. And this comes a lot in cartoons, in Hollywood movies, in mythologies, and all the things that talk about the story of heroics in humanity. It's all about this battle against the force of evil by some individual or small group of individuals. So the story always seems to be quite unbalanced, that one side is just very few and the other side is very many, but whoever is on the side of good will win. That's the story. It doesn't always necessarily happen like that, but that's the story. And when we're talking about the ultimate victory, we want to prove that that story is correct, and that if you are on the side of goodness, the side of righteousness, then you will win, and you have to play a hero part as the one who actually faces negativity and takes it down. So then how does that play out on an individual level? And where does all this negativity come from? Because it has to come from somewhere. It doesn't just come out of thin air. So when you study about spirituality and meditation, then you learn about all these things as they apply in terms of the collective, the humanity, the human story, and also on the level of the individual. So we are concerned about ourselves as individuals and about the different experiences that take place within. There are many days where you feel really down or depressed, or you may feel angry, antagonistic, everybody's against you, you're against everybody. That happens. You could be in a time when nothing goes right and nothing works out, and that can make you feel really rather unhappy, sad, and you also experience injustice, different types of injustice, and all of these things will take space in your mind and can bring you out of balance and also out of proportion. So, generally speaking, if somebody tells you something, you expect that they're telling it to you correctly, truthfully, accurately. But when a person is out of balance and their feelings are out of proportion from what's really going on, then they'll tell you the wrong story. And then later on you find out, oh, that was an exaggeration and you took it for real. But then you have to retract your response to it, and that's just the way it has to be, because, if somebody tells you something dramatic, it may be true or it may be false. And if you assume that it's false, then you may actually not do what you need to do in a situation like that. And if you assume that it's true and it's actually false, then you put yourself in a position where people will say, oh, you got taken for a ride. So it's not so easy. But I think in general, it's probably a good policy to listen to the messages that are coming and try to check if it's for real or not. And I think sometimes it's a good idea to take it seriously. Now, when a very negative feeling comes into you, and it doesn't seem to come from any reasonable source, you sometimes think there's something wrong with you, that where did this feeling come from? And sometimes it is something from maybe a few lives ago. It can be some negative thing that comes up to be settled at the time when it comes up to be settled. And you will experience this in the form of an inexplicable negative feeling. And you have to deal with it because it's strong. It wants to take you over. And you say to yourself, well, whatever it is, I have to manage it, no matter what. So a good idea is not to spend too much time asking, why is this there? Because you lose a lot of time and energy for that. So if something is there and you have a certain amount of spiritual education, it's quite reasonable and realistic to say to yourself, this is a karmic debt come up for settlement, and what I have to do is get through it, endure it, because it will pass. And this expression to give to yourself, "it will pass," is really good, because then you don't waste time doing anything other than getting through it, because that is actually the right thing to do. Because if you try to fight it or make a big deal out of it, then you actually increase it, and then you have to have more difficulty, more suffering than you would have if you just simply just get through it. And you get experienced with this, and you say, okay, it's just a matter of getting through it. This can sometimes happen when you experience illness. And there are many, many different kinds of illnesses today. Of course, the most famous one at the moment is the COVID-19, which is the pandemic, and many, many people are afraid of it. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about it. Many people get it without symptoms. Some people get it with very severe symptoms, and if you have underlying health issues and you get it, then it can be fatal. And there are many who have died from it, quite a lot who have recovered from it, and maybe quite a lot who don't even know that they had it. This is the nature of this virus. But whatever it is, if something like this or any other illness comes, it has an effect on your body, but it also has an effect on your mind. And so with the help of the medical profession, you can take whatever measures are possible and suitable to mitigate the illness. But all of this takes time, and you have feelings about it, thoughts about it, and concerns about it. And while you are maybe on a ventilator, or you are feeling really diminished, you're not feeling yourself, you have pain, you feel discomfort, maybe it's not as bad as pain, so you're not having pain medication, but you're out of sorts, and you're in that state for a long time, and this can easily make you emotionally delicate. Maybe you feel that your needs are not being met, people are not taking care of you. You start to feel your feelings much more acutely than when you're well. And so if you are a person who's a meditator since a long time, you would have accumulated spiritual power, which helps you at such times, and you're able to get through those periods, which can be very long, but without really breaking down or without it overwhelming you and getting the better of you. And this is what that inner war is about. And when you are a good warrior, a good spiritual warrior, I think one of the interesting signs of this is that you don't really engage with whatever is opposing you, but you work with it. Because when you engage with it and it becomes an adversarial relationship, the suffering, the discomfort will increase and intensify. But if you manage it in a different way, by working with it, by flexing with it, by allowing it to be there and enduring it and accommodating it and managing it, it's able to, as it were, do its work undisturbed by your opposition to it. And then the karmic account is settled with the least possible disturbance, and you're also able to manage it without getting overwhelmed. So a person who prepares themselves for any eventuality by doing a spiritual practice is actually making a very good investment in case of difficulty that can come up anytime, and it does come up. definitely it comes up. No one is exempt, because every one of us has either done something against our conscience, or we have allowed someone else to violate us or get through or get in and damage us somehow or the other. And in both cases, it creates a karmic debt. And in both cases, there's a wound in the soul, and that will come up for settlement. It'll come up for healing and achieving this state of freedom from that unprocessed wound or negative action. Takes the form of inner suffering, hardship, disturbance, and dark time. And the most powerful way to manage it is by your power of endurance. And by power of endurance, I mean that your threshold of pain, your threshold of discomfort becomes quite high, and you're able to hold it for as long as it's there. You're able to bear it, and then it passes away. When we react, when we resist, when we start fighting against it, which is totally normal, totally natural, but it makes it worse. And so for a person to have that understanding as well as that inner power to not resist when all the things of your being say, we've got to fight against this, and actually that's not the best way to win. To win, you have to be a person with the idea that I am already victorious. Now, the present time that we're passing through seasonally is the time of the festival of Diwali, which is the festival of lights. And this is a symbolic festival from India, which describes what happens after the victory. And so before Diwali, there is the actual destruction of the forces of negativity, and before that there are the 9 nights of the Shiva Shaktis. So this is actually very interesting, because the Shiva Shaktis are really the ultimate warriors. So these are women who have enormous power, and they are shown with lots of arms, and in their hands they have quite fearsome weapons, and their faces are very serene and smiling, and some of them they are riding lions and tigers and pretty dangerous animals, but they seem to be quite comfortable on there. And then there are others who are trampling on animals and on demons and so on. So these goddesses are pretty fierce, and it's symbolic of this ultimate warrior that we're talking about today. And the ultimate warrior is the one who has all of these weapons, but not in the form of guns and swords and that sort of thing, but is a different kind of weaponry, and that is the weaponry of inner powers. So inner powers are what we call powers of yoga. So one of those powers is the power of accommodation, to accommodate difficulties, to accommodate pain, to accommodate mental anguish and distress. And there are other powers, and all of these powers are represented by these weapons. And if you look at the kind of weapons that the goddesses are holding, some of them are very obvious weapons like swords and mace and a trident and something that you could definitely stick into somebody and draw blood. So they're clearly weapons, but there are other weapons. And one of them is a rosary. That's interesting that a necklace of beads could be a weapon. And then there's another one, which is a flower, a lotus flower. And there's another one, which is a shell. And so these interesting weapons. Another weapon is just a flame on the palm of the hand, just a flame. And so fire is definitely used in military weapons, but just a flame by itself is not the same as an incendiary bomb, for example. So these weapons are very interesting in terms of their symbolic value. So a rosary, how could a rosary be a weapon? So a rosary is symbolic of how you use your mind to maintain a state of serenity and equilibrium when all around you you're under threat, you're under attack, you are in pain, there's everything happening to pull you away from your inner stillness, your inner serenity. So the rosary represents this turning of the mind, and when something is really very focused, it's not still like a needle poking something. It's more like a drill, which is turning at high speed. And when people are using rosaries, they are turning the beads, which means your mind has to be turning around an idea which holds your intention more powerfully than the power of an external or even an internal circumstance that wants to pull your attention and overwhelm you. So that is a very good defense weapon. The other one, which is I think quite interesting, is the flower. And the lotus flower is really the symbol of being in it, but not part of it. So you're in a situation, you're sick, you're in a dysfunctional family situation, you're in a professional situation where you're being maybe exploited or not treated well, and you have to take care of yourself in the midst of that because you don't want to be taken down by something like that. So you use the flower. And the flower is that, yeah, you're there, and they may be shouting at you or sending you unpleasant messages or sexual harassment or all the sorts of things that happen. But you position yourself as a lotus. That means you are detached. So that most of these efforts of people who do this sort of thing to each other are efforts to take you down by getting to you emotionally and trying to get you into a fight that they will win because they're stronger or they're in a higher position, or they threaten you with firing you or denouncing you. Many things, many games are played on those who are weaker or vulnerable. But you have your flower, which they will not see. But it is an instrument symbolic of detachment, where you are not able to be got at by any of these efforts to get to you. And your ability to stay in your stage of detachment and in your power is something that will eventually win the day, because they run out of tricks and then they have to go away and leave you alone. And you have to be slightly terrifying so they don't come back again. And you can do that with your eyes The flame is a very interesting one. The warrior who has a flame is a person who can use their meditative capacity to focus on light and to actually transform themselves into a bright light. And sometimes this is just a very, very good thing, because then you become invisible, or they become really afraid of that light. You haven't done anything violent, but you have sent a message which destabilizes your attacker. So this light is a very good weapon. But in order for you to develop skill in the use of these very subtle weapons, you have to understand them well, you have to know how to use them, and you also need a lot of opportunities to practice them. So there will be many circumstances where you find yourself in these kinds of situations, and every time that happens, understand that you have put it out to the universe that you want to get skilled in the use of these weapons, and so you'll get opportunities to practice. And sometimes you will win, sometimes you will lose. So if you win, that's great. If you lose, then you have to take a look at what happened. And it's like your perception functions like a camera, and you can memorize what happened. And so look very, very carefully at that footage in your mind to be able to calculate exactly what you did which made it possible for you to lose that particular scuffle. And then the next time it comes up, you will handle yourself differently. You will become more expert in the use of your weapon, and that is the only way that you can get skill. You don't acquire skill by just thinking about it. You have to be in the situation and doing it. A lot of it has to do with your sense of self. If you are in spiritual practice, one very important thing is that you need to be able to see very clearly who you are and be willing and ready to assert that in circumstances where many people around you see you through a filter that doesn't allow them to see who you are, but which is more like projection. And so it's very important in the nonviolent war to understand when someone is projecting their preconceptions on you and they see you as something low, something they don't like, something that is connected with their prejudices, and you may somehow be someone that they're prejudiced against. They won't say it, but you have to be able to understand what's going on, because there are a lot of games that happen. And the games are that people will say one thing, but they will have some other thing going on the inside. They have a different agenda, they have a different motivation, and so they will attempt to manipulate you, to deceive you, to get you to put yourself in traps or to trap you, and you need to be very discerning. So the third eye is a very, very helpful weapon, and the third eye is like a power of discernment, where you're able to pick up the difference between what someone presents as being the reality and the vibration going with that says there's a dissonance here, And so that means that that person is lying, that person is misrepresenting themselves to you, that person has another hidden agenda, and your third eye is a good weapon because you can see what their hidden agenda is. So then instead of responding to what they want you to respond to, you respond to the reality. And when you're responding to the reality, then you're in your power and the circumstances are under your control because you didn't get deceived. And so especially in spiritual practice, you get a lot of tests of deception. And spiritual practice is done in the context of society. And so you have the social system of your family and all the different personalities who are there. And if you're talking about the extended family, there can be a lot of people. And there are some cultures of the world where there's just the whole extended family is together, and you have to deal with many karmic accounts and different people's different agendas, and you have to find your way through that obstacle course. And so that also enables you to develop a lot of skills there. In the same way, in your professional environment, there are other people. It's usually very competitive, and a good way to compete in many people's eyes is not to be better at and meritorious and so on, but to put down everybody else, and then in that way you rise. And so that means all these games are going on. And so you need to see who you can trust, who you cannot trust. If you are a really deeply clear and honest person, then it becomes very difficult for people to deceive you because you will get a little signal. But the thing is this, sometimes you get people who are very honest, but they're also very naive as well as honest. So you can't afford to have that combination, because then you will doubt the signals and give the benefit of the doubt to the person who is trying to deceive you. So it's very important not to be naive and to listen to the signals that come to you from within. These are signals from your intuition, from your conscience, that let you know what's going on. And you need to have faith in that, even though all the appearances are just fine. But there's this little vibration that says, everything looks good, but it's not good, so watch your back and take care, because there's a trap happening here. So be alert and sidestep these kinds of traps. And then you win that particular skirmish. And I think that when you say to yourself, okay, yes, let me be someone who lives by high principles, who will not compromise your principles, but yet still you have to know how to compromise, because being rigid is not a good way to end up with the ultimate victory. So there are certain kinds of compromises that are needed, and the compromises are within a range so that you remain true to yourself and you don't betray yourself. And this is also a very important characteristic of the warrior who has the ultimate victory, is you do not betray. You have like a line or lines which cannot be crossed, and these are very clearly defined, and they're very helpful to have these lines that are connected with your principles by which you live. Because if someone wants to take you over or trap you or make you vulnerable or take advantage of vulnerability, that person will invariably try to get you to accept something that is not acceptable to you. And so when you find yourself in that situation, you have to be willing to not go there and realize that they are going to mock you and ridicule you and so on, because you can be dealt with that way if you are sensitive to mockery and ridicule and all this. But it's all part of the game, and then you need to use your power of this is me, this is what I will do, this is what I won't do, and if you don't like it, have a nice day, and that's it, and okay. Because you do not let yourself get caught up in, dependent on, impressed by, attracted by any of these things. But everyone has an Achilles heel. So an Achilles heel is where you're weak. And so if you're weak, you have a weakness, then circumstances will expose that weak part of you as often as possible, because then you will have to again and again and again work with that weakness. And so by working with that weakness, that changes from a real problem for you into something that actually becomes an opportunity, a strength. And there you use another power, and that is called the power of transformation. And I think that conjuring tricks are a good symbol for this, because you know, when you go to see a conjurer, he will turn a handkerchief into a rabbit or something like this. And this is that you take a situation, even if it includes your own weakness, you take that weakness and you turn it into a strength. By this power of transformation. Or you take a circumstance which is really not good for you, but you turn it to your advantage. And for that you have to be very creative and sharp and quick-witted. And then you win. These weaknesses, susceptibilities, self-doubt, not realizing your value. Maybe you've had many years, people have diminished you or denied you your rights, denied you opportunities that you have a right to. And there is a lot of this that goes on in the world. And many people, they accept that and they absorb it, and then they lose themselves in all of that. So a very important part of an ultimate warrior's preparation is to be very clear who you are, and not to mind if nobody reflects that or validates that. From a psychological point of view, when people are growing up, they really need their parents to reflect them as they are, because this is how they find themselves. And when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, or where there is prejudice against you for one reason or another, they will reflect you back incorrectly, and that will create moral confusion in the child, and that will remain with the person all the way into adulthood. And that person has to get over that. And that is a big piece of psychological work, but it's also spiritual work, because there's I think, a bit of a blurred line between where psychology finishes and spirituality starts, and in many cases it's the same thing. But definitely to see yourself as who you really are is, I think, probably beyond the psychological side of things, because psychological work means you want to come back to normal, but spiritual work is you want to transcend the ordinary, you want to transcend the everyday and find a dimension of yourself which is greater than the normal. And sometimes people talk about finding your greatness, and I think that there are many people who have extraordinary capacities but don't really have enough faith in the self to demonstrate that, to allow themselves to ride on that. And so there are many situations where you need to achieve victory, because every time you achieve victory in any situation, it helps you to accept your greatness. It helps you to accept that whatever people were saying about you is absolutely nonsense, and that you are someone with power, with talent, with value, with importance. You have a great contribution to make. And if we wait for somebody else to tell us you're wonderful, marvelous, and fantastic, that probably won't happen. Or if it does happen, maybe flattery, and that's not going to help. So by your accomplishments, which reflect you back to yourself, you also achieve another kind of weapon, which is a kind of faith in yourself. For a person in spiritual practice, the relationship and connection with the divine is very important. And when we do meditation and study spirituality, what we're looking at especially is the self as an invincible, immortal, eternal soul, a being of light who cannot be destroyed. And if you know that you cannot be destroyed as a spiritual being, and you identify yourself with that extremely powerful, real, invincible but intangible aspect of yourself, then that's a very important weapon right there. And the soul may be weak, no doubt. There is weakness in souls. A soul may be damaged, corrupted, many things. But what is meditation for? Meditation is to restore the soul to its original pristine condition. And that's really wonderful, because sometimes people think that once they're damaged, that's it, you can't get undamaged. But because the soul is eternal and immortal, it means it has to be repaired, because it can't just stay eternally out of order. No. Any disorder, any disturbance, any damage that happens to the soul can be repaired, but how? Your doctor will not do that. Your mechanic will not do that. This is out of that range. The soul is non-material. The soul is spirit. The soul is the deepest part of yourself. And so in spiritual practice, it means the soul connects with the divine source. And that connection with the divine source has a lot of impact. And one thing it will do is it will repair any damage through vibrations. And vibrations are very interesting, because anything which is integral and intact has a certain vibration, and if it gets damaged, it's a different vibration. So you can actually restore it to its original condition by this resonance. So when you're in meditation, you're in the consciousness of yourself as a spiritual being, and you come in resonance with the divine power, and this alters your condition and brings you back to your original pristine state, which means all the damage gets repaired. And so you need to give time to this, because you can't repair all the damage just like in 5 minutes. No, it takes many days, and you do it a little bit at a time, and you intensify and heighten and make your connection and your ability to take that powerful influx of vibration and spiritual energy, and slowly you build it up, and you get to be one mighty force as time goes by. And this is the sign of the ultimate warrior, is that he doesn't have to do anything. He is victorious in advance of any fight, because any situation that comes to you, whether it's from the inside, whether it's a settlement of karma, or whether it's an attack from the outside, or anything, you're skilled in all the different aspects of that non-violent war, and so you say, yeah, come, and you play with those oppositions, those shots, and it becomes like a sport, and you become like an expert swordsman, an expert at shooting and sending arrows and creating fire and becoming bright light, becoming independent, becoming free, becoming soft, becoming so fast nobody can find you, and just reflecting truth. And there you are, the ultimate warrior. And this is symbolized by these goddesses. So you have great power, but you don't need to display it, it's just there. And that is shown in your smiling face and your sweet eyes of the woman. Nobody thinks a woman is going to be a huge warrior, except there are examples. Joan of Arc, the Queen of Jassy. There are many powerful women, warriors, but the subtle, secret, inner, ultimate warrior is the right of every man, woman, and perhaps even child. So let us have a few moments together of meditation to practice this wonderful way of tuning with yourself, going deep inside. And it's simply a matter of thought. Just allow yourself to turn within. Take a few moments to do that. And to feel that inner, beautiful self that you are. The pure being of light, invisible, beautiful, loving, and very powerful. All this contained in an infinitesimal point of light, energy. And with your thought, turn your mind above and beyond, outside the world of matter, go to a world of light on another level, another dimension. Make contact with the light that is there beyond. Point to point with a ray of light connecting the two. This is yoga. Be focused, still, light. Be open to receive the resonance, the power, the energy of the divine that is flowing towards you. Feel that resonance. Become part of it. Let it be part of you. Feel your vibrations getting harmonized, purified. And you feel yourself to be more real, different. You found yourself. Don't let yourself go again. And then gently let yourself return back to the everyday world, but keeping contact with that resonance. This is a practice. Keep doing it.